Sergeant Elijah Brooks was just trying to get home after honoring a fallen comrade still in full Army uniform. But before he could pay for a bottle of water, two white police officers stormed in, accused him of impersonating a soldier, and handcuffed him on the sidewalk without asking a single question. No proof, no pause, just a rush to judgment. But Elijah didn't resist. He made one phone call that would shake the entire system. How did a quiet soldier turn humiliation into a national reckoning? If that question grabs you like this, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Now, let me tell you the full story. It had been a long, heavy morning. Sergeant Elijah Brooks stood under the sun, still in his pressed Army Reserve uniform, his boots silent on the sidewalk outside a small corner store on Maple Street. On his chest, beneath a thin layer of dust and sunlight, the bronze star caught a brief glint. He hadn't changed after the memorial hadn't wanted to. Not today. Today was for Marcus. The service at Fort McPherson had been quiet, respectful. Fewer and fewer people showed up to those ceremonies nowadays, but Elijah always did, every year, without fail. Marcus had died in his arms 13 years ago, and Elijah hadn't forgotten a minute of it. Not the sound, not the silence, not the way Marcus said, "Tell my mama I kept my promise." So Elijah kept his. As he stepped into the little store, bells above the door jingled softly. Familiar sound. Familiar smell, too. Coffee grinds, cleaning spray, and the faint burn of a heat lamp that had kept the same hot dogs turning since sunrise. "Sergeant Brooks," a voice called out. "Still standing tall, I see." Elijah smiled, tipping his head toward the counter. "Always Mr. Abbas." Mr. Abbas, mid-50s mustache, neat apron, wrinkled, grinned, and reached over to hit the fan behind him. "Hot day to be walking around in full gear, Habibi. You just come from base, from Fort McPherson." Elijah nodded. "Memorial service." Mr. Abbas's smile faded just a bit. He touched his heart. "For your friend, yes." Elijah didn't speak. He just nodded again. The silence between them was familiar. It wasn't uncomfortable. Just the kind shared between two men who'd seen too much and said too little. Elijah grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and walked toward the counter, but a small voice stopped him near the candy rack. "Are you a real soldier?" He turned slowly. A little girl no more than 10 stared up at him wide-eyed, blonde ponytail, worn-out sandals, chewing nervously on a red licorice string. She had a smartphone half hanging from her back pocket. Elijah gave her a soft smile. "Yes, ma'am." "I am." She blinked. "Like a real one, like in the movies? Do you fight bad guys?" He chuckled under his breath, crouching a little so they were eye level. "Not like in the movies. And not everyone I face is bad. Some are just lost." She tilted her head. "So, are you like a superhero?" Mr. Abbas chuckled behind the counter. "You hear that, Sergeant? She thinks you're Captain America." Elijah looked back at the girl. "No cape," he said gently. "But I wear this for the same reason heroes do, to protect people." She hesitated, then whispered, "I think you are one." Elijah's throat tightened a little. "Thank you, sweetheart." He stood back up, nodding once, and approached the register. "I'll pay for his water," Mr. Abbas said, before Elijah could reach for his wallet. "It's the least I can do." "You don't have to." "I want to," Mr. Abbas said, quieter now. "Men like you, we don't thank enough." Elijah gave him a firm handshake across the counter. "Then let me thank you back for remembering." As he turned to leave, the door jingled again, but this time the sound was sharp jarring. Screeching tires outside, raised voices, the sudden unmistakable pop of a radio dispatch cutting through a cruiser's speaker. Elijah froze. "Mr. Abbas looked up sharply. "What is that?" Elijah stepped toward the glass and saw them, 2 police cruisers pulling hard into the curb. One door slammed, then another. 2 white officers emerged, hands already resting on their belts. Their body language was loud before they said a word. One was tall, clean-shaven, sunglasses low on his nose. The other was shorter, bulkier, with his vest half unzipped. Their faces didn't carry confusion. They carried certainty. And that's when Elijah's jaw clenched for the first time. Not out of fear, out of something colder. He looked at Ellie, who was still by the candy rack, frozen mid-bite. Her licorice fell to the floor. Elijah had just enough time to murmur, "Sweetheart, go stand by Mr. Abbas." "All right," before the first officer shouted through the door. "You in the uniform, step outside." Now. Mr. Abbas stepped forward. "Officers, what's going on?" "Stay back," the taller one snapped. "This doesn't concern you." Elijah didn't move. "Not yet." His voice was steady. "Is there a problem?" The shorter officer sneered. "Yeah. Problem is, you're pretending to be a soldier." Silence. Ellie gasped. Mr. Abbas whispered, "What?" But Elijah didn't say anything. Not yet. Because in that moment he remembered something Marcus once said. You don't fight fire with fire. You wait for the right moment. And then you burn the whole damn house down with the truth. Elijah took a slow step forward, his uniform still sharp, his boots still grounded. "I served this country," he said quietly, "and I don't plan to stop today." It happened fast. Too fast for anyone to think. Too loud for anyone to speak. The wail of sirens cut through the street like a blade. 2 police cruisers swerved hard into the curb tires, screaming against the asphalt. One door flew open, then the other, and they came out hot. Officer Brent Holman, tall, squared-jaw aviator shades, moved like he already knew exactly what he was about to do. His hand hovered near his holster. Behind him was Officer Todd Reese, stockier, younger, slower to move, but following without question. They didn't ask who called. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't even look around. Their eyes locked on one person. Elijah Brooks, standing there, still in uniform, holding a bottle of water, boots polished collar straight, bronze star gleaming. Holman squinted. "Hey," he barked, stepping closer. "You drop the act. Outside. Now." The store fell quiet. You could hear the hum of the fridge behind the counter, the buzz of a fly near the window. Mr. Abbas raised a hand. "Officers, there must be a mistake." Holman shoved past him like he wasn't even there. "Back off. This doesn't concern you." Elijah's shoulders didn't move. His voice was low, calm. "What seems to be the problem?" Officer Holman's lips curled. "Impersonating a soldier is a federal crime." Elijah blinked once. "Excuse me," Reese came up beside Holman, scanning Elijah from head to toe. "That's a pretty convincing uniform you've got. Got the boots right. The ribbons, too." Mr. Abbas stepped forward again, firmer this time. "He's not impersonating anyone. That man is a real soldier. He's..." Holman turned, jabbed a finger in Abbas's face. "Do you want to get arrested for obstruction?" Abbas froze, mouth open, eyes wide. He stepped back slowly. Ellie from behind the candy shelf crouched lower. Her little hand clutched her phone tighter. Elijah looked Holman in the eye. "I'm Sergeant Elijah Brooks, Army Reserve." "You can check, I don't need to check." Holman snapped. "I've seen this act before." Elijah reached calmly into his pocket slowly like he'd done 1,000 times before on the field and pulled out his military ID. He extended it. Holman didn't even glance. "You think flashing a fake badge is going to work on me?" he sneered. "You people will do anything for attention." Elijah didn't flinch, but something flickered in his eyes. "You people." It sat there in the air like a stain no one wanted to acknowledge. "I've done nothing wrong," Elijah said, still holding the ID. Reese, to his credit, hesitated. His eyes flicked to the badge, then to Holman. "Brent," he said, voice low. "Maybe we should." But Holman was already moving. He grabbed Elijah's arm, twisted it hard behind his back. The water bottle slipped from Elijah's hand and rolled across the tile floor. Click. The first cuff snapped shut. "Hands behind your back," Holman barked. "You're under investigation for impersonating military personnel." Elijah didn't resist. He didn't shout. He just stared at the floor, like he was somewhere else entirely. Reese fastened the other cuff, quieter than Holman, almost like he didn't want to be seen. Mr. Abbas raised his voice, now frantic. "You're making a mistake. That man has been coming here for years. Sir, step back or you'll be detained." Holman pulled Elijah toward the door. Elijah glanced once toward Ellie. She was shaking. He gave her the smallest nod, and that was when she hit record. The officers dragged Elijah outside. The sun was hotter now. The sidewalk burned. Cars slowed as people craned their necks to see what was happening. A soldier, in uniform, being cuffed and pulled like a shoplifter. No explanation, no hesitation. Holman pushed Elijah to his knees. "Let's see if you're still proud wearing that fake badge now." Elijah said nothing. But Ellie's phone didn't stop recording. The sidewalk was hot enough to fry an egg. But they didn't care. Officer Holman shoved Elijah to his knees right there on the edge of the curb between a trash can and a storm drain. Cars slowed down, people stared. Phones came out, but no one said a word. He was still in uniform, still wearing his name, still carrying every scar, every loss, every quiet night spent under enemy fire, and now he was on his knees, hands cuffed behind him as if none of that ever mattered. "You think that uniform makes you somebody?" Holman barked loud enough for the street to hear. "You're nothing. You hear me." Elijah didn't flinch, didn't blink, just stared at the ground. Behind him, Reese looked down, shifting his feet. Sweat beaded down his temple. His eyes flicked to the patches on Elijah's sleeve, then back to the street. But he didn't say anything. Not yet. Mr. Abbas stood frozen in the doorway, both fists clenched at his sides. "This is wrong," he said under his breath. "This is so damn wrong." Inside the store, Ellie hadn't moved. Her small hands were shaking, but the phone didn't stop recording. She stayed hidden, eyes wide, breath short, holding the screen just steady enough to capture it all. Elijah's knees were burning now. The concrete bit through his pants and the sun pressed against the back of his neck like a hand trying to shove him down further. But he didn't bow his head. He never did. Holman circled in front of him, pacing like he was waiting for Elijah to snap. "You gonna say something, soldier? Gonna confess you're a fraud?" Elijah lifted his eyes calm and steady. "I'd like to make a phone call." Holman snorted. "You're not under arrest. Yet." "No phone call." "It's standard procedure," Elijah replied. "Still calm, still controlled. You're detaining me. I have a right to contact my command." Holman leaned in. "You think I give a damn who you call Reese?" Cleared his throat. "Let him. What's the worst that could happen?" Holman shot him a glare. Reese shrugged. "He's not resisting. Let him call. Won't change anything." Holman hesitated, jaw tightening. Elijah didn't wait. He turned, slightly raised his voice just enough and said, "Hey Siri, call Colonel Langston." There was a pause. Then the phone buzzed in his pocket, vibrating against the denim and pressed fabric of his uniform. A second later, a clear, sharp voice came through the speaker. "This is Colonel Everett Langston." Elijah didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Sir, this is Sergeant Elijah Brooks. I've been wrongfully detained. 2 officers are accusing me of impersonating military personnel. I've shown them my ID. They refused to look." A silence. Then the voice replied, slow, firm, and unmistakably in command. "Stay right where you are. I'm on my way." The line cut. Elijah looked up straight at Holman, and then came the words, quiet, unshaken, deadly certain. You just made the last mistake of your career. Holman froze for a half second. Just one. And then laughed. Oh, that's cute. You think one phone call is gonna save you? But something in Elijah's eyes made him step back. Because Elijah wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't even sweating. He was just still. Still like a mountain that knew the storm was coming and wasn't afraid of the rain. Mr. Abbas finally found his voice. Who did he call Colonel Everett Langston? Elijah replied without turning. Commanding officer, United States Army, and he doesn't like being disrespected. Holman's mouth opened slightly. A flicker of uncertainty passed across his face, but just for a second. Then, the mask returned. Well, he muttered, trying to recover. Guess we'll all just wait together, huh? Reese looked at his watch. He didn't say anything, but the sweat on his neck didn't stop. The street had quieted now. People kept filming. From across the gas station, from inside their cars. One woman whispered, Is that real? Another said, They handcuffed a soldier, but no one intervened. They just watched. Elijah looked up toward the sky, the light blinding his chest, rising slowly with every breath. He wasn't praying. He was remembering. Marcus. Afghanistan. That last breath. That promise. I'll keep wearing this uniform, even if the country forgets what it means. Elijah didn't move. Still on his knees, still in uniform, hands cuffed behind his back, he stared up at the cloudless sky like he could almost see past it. The sun beat down on his face. Sweat traced the edge of his jaw. But he didn't blink, didn't flinch. Somewhere in his mind, he heard it again. The words drilled into him at 17. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, even if the enemy wears a badge. That part was never said out loud, but every black soldier learned it early. Holman stood a few feet away, leaning against the patrol car with arms crossed, chewing gum like he was watching a street performer. Still acting like a damn saint, he muttered. Let's leave the cuffs on a few more minutes, just so he remembers who's in charge. Reese didn't respond. He was pacing now, looking around the street, watching people filming, watching the discomfort spread like wildfire. This wasn't going away, not like the others. Inside the store, Ellie was still behind the shelf. Her little hands trembled as she gripped the phone. She didn't understand everything, but she knew one thing. They were hurting someone good. She hit a button and called her mom. Ellie came the voice on the line. Mama, she whispered. They're hurting a soldier, a good man. They think he's lying, but he's not. He's not fighting them. He's just kneeling. Where are you? The gas station. The one by the school. Mama, please come. The call dropped. Ellie pressed her back against the cereal shelf and tried not to cry. Mr. Abbas stood frozen behind the counter, staring through the glass door like his feet had grown roots. His eyes were glassy, his jaw clenched. He wanted to move, wanted to scream. But he'd lived through war. He knew what came next when you raised your voice at men with power and no patience. So he stood there, powerless. Outside, a silence settled that didn't feel like peace. It felt like pressure, like the second before a storm breaks when even the air doesn't know what to do. Elijah didn't speak. He just stared ahead, at a spot on the sidewalk where a single ant crawled past his boot. No shouting, no panic, just breath and pain. Not the pain of the knee or the heat or the cuffs, but the deeper kind. The kind you carry for a country that asks you to bleed for it, then forgets your name. A man walked past with his young son, stopped, whispered something to the boy. The boy looked confused, looked at Elijah, then asked, Dad, is he bad? The father didn't answer. He just pulled the boy away. Elijah closed his eyes. One breath, one heartbeat, one memory. Afghanistan, the heat, the gunfire. Marcus diving to shield the medic. Tell my mom I died doing something right, Marcus had whispered, bleeding out on hot sand. Elijah had promised he would, and he had, every year, including this one, until now. Now he was the one bleeding not blood, but dignity, and no one was coming to stop it, except maybe one man, Colonel Langston. He hoped the colonel would bring fire. Holman checked his watch, bored. Bet your hero friend's stuck in traffic. Maybe he'll come dressed like Captain America. Reese let out a nervous laugh, but quickly looked away when Elijah met his eyes. Still no words. But those eyes, they weren't afraid. They were steel. Holman kicked at the sidewalk. How about this, we keep him here another 10, maybe 15 minutes. Let the sun cook that smug face of his. Then he leaned in. Close. Too close. See, that's the problem with you people. You think a uniform erases where you came from. You think it buys you respect. But out here, I decide who you are. Not that flag. Not that rank. Me. Elijah slowly turned his head, eyes unblinking, and for the first time his voice was sharp. Not loud, but pointed like a blade. You can strip the rank. You can keep the cuffs. But you don't get to define me. Not today. Holman flinched. Just slightly. That's when the sirens began. Not police sirens, but the sound of an engine-sharp, fast official. It was faint, but it was coming. And Holman's eyes flicked toward the sound. Elijah closed his eyes again. His fingers twitched against the metal cuffs. Not from fear, from restraint. The only thing harder than fighting back was not fighting back. The rumble came first. Not loud, not dramatic, just different. A deeper kind of sound, like power that didn't need to announce itself. 3 matte black SUVs turned slowly onto the block. No license plates, no markings, just precision. They didn't blast sirens. They didn't flash lights. They didn't need to. Everything around them just stopped. Officer Holman narrowed his eyes, straightened his back. What the hell is that? Reese took a half step back. His gut already knew. The SUVs rolled to a clean stop at the curb just 10 feet from where Elijah still knelt on the scorching concrete. From the first SUV, 4 soldiers stepped out. Not cops. Not National Guard. These men wore jet-black uniforms with sharp silver insignias, emblems not every American would recognize. But Elijah did. Special Operations Command. The real kind. Their movements were quiet. No shouting, no panic. Just order. Precise, practiced, powerful. Then the back door of the middle SUV opened. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. Colonel Everett Langston. Decorated. Respected. Feared by some. Revered by others. He walked like a man who had walked through war and come out steel. His uniform was immaculate. His eyes scanned the scene like a laser. People recording on their phones went silent. Even Ellie, still crouched by the shelf inside the store, peeked out with wide eyes. Langston didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He just spoke, and the world listened. Who put Sergeant Elijah Brooks in handcuffs? Holman puffed up his chest, trying to regain control of a scene he no longer owned. He's impersonating. Langston raised one hand. Slowly. No aggression. Just enough to say, "You've said enough." Then he stepped closer. That man has served 3 tours. He holds the Bronze Star for heroism. He has bled on foreign soil so you could sleep safely at night. He turned eyes boring into Holman. And you put him on his knees. On American concrete. Reese took a shaky breath. Holman said nothing. Langston looked down at Elijah. Still kneeling, still silent, still proud. He gave the slightest nod. 2 soldiers stepped forward. No hesitation. One unclipped the cuffs. The other offered his hand. Elijah didn't take it right away. He stood on his own. Slow. Steady. Dignified. Langston met him halfway. "Sergeant Brooks." "You okay?" Elijah finally spoke, his voice hoarse but firm. "I will be, sir." Langston put a hand on his shoulder, then turned back to the officers. "I'm not here alone." And as if on cue, another figure stepped out of the third SUV. A civilian, briefcase in hand, sharp suit, determined eyes. Major Carver, JAG Corps. I'm the legal liaison assigned to this incident. He pulled out a set of papers. This is a federal injunction. Officer Brent Holman, you are hereby suspended pending investigation for abuse of authority, false arrest, and racial misconduct. Holman blinked. This is a mistake. You will immediately surrender your badge, firearm, and radio. Langston took one slow step forward. His tone dropped like stone. You don't get to rewrite what happened here today. Too many cameras, too many witnesses, and too much blood in that man's boots for you to keep pretending. Holman hesitated. One of the special ops soldiers stepped closer. Badge, gun, radio, now. With trembling fingers, Holman reached for his belt, pulled the badge, dropped it. Then the gun. Then the radio. The sound of metal hitting concrete echoed in the heat like thunder. Reese stayed frozen. The legal officer turned to him. You'll be called for questioning. You may remain on desk duty until reviewed. Elijah stood still through it all, silent, not because he had nothing to say, but because all of this said enough. From the store, Ellie stepped outside. She wasn't hiding anymore. She clutched her phone tight, holding up the video she'd filmed. Langston noticed. He crouched, slightly softening. What's your name, Ellie? You recorded everything. She nodded. Yes, sir. That was brave. You helped stop something ugly. Ellie looked at Elijah. He didn't do anything wrong. Langston smiled, just barely. I know. And now the world will know too. Elijah looked down at the little girl. Thank you, Ellie. She ran back to her mom, who had just pulled up in a minivan with panic on her face. The soldiers returned to the SUVs. Langston didn't rush Elijah, just stood with him. You want a ride? Sergeant Elijah shook his head. No, sir. I think I need to walk a little. Langston nodded. Then walk tall. You earn that uniform every damn day. It started with a 10-year-old girl and a shaky video. Ellie posted the clip from her mom's phone. Just a minute and a half long. No music, no edits, just raw truth. A black man in uniform, handcuffed, kneeling, shamed by the very system he once swore to protect. Then, the arrival, the SUVs, the colonel, the silence. The moment Holman dropped his badge onto the sunlit pavement. By the end of the second hour, it had over 500,000 views. By sunset, 10 million. Comment sections filled like wildfire. This is why people don't trust the badge anymore. That little girl is braver than most adults I know. He didn't even flinch. That's real strength. People were angry, but not just angry awake. For the first time, they weren't just scrolling past injustice. They were sharing it, talking about it, asking questions, and the voices grew louder. Across town, Mr. Abbas stood outside his corner store. Cameras surrounded him, journalists leaning in, but he didn't fumble for words. He pointed to the very sidewalk where Elijah had knelt just hours before. That man comes here every month. He checks in on me, on Ellie, on the old lady who lives 2 doors down. He wears the uniform, yes, but more importantly, he carries himself with honor. A pause. Then his voice cracked. They didn't just arrest a soldier today. They arrested a human being. Later that evening, another voice entered the conversation, not from a podium, not behind a title, but from the heart. Martha Colburn, 84 years old, posted a simple video from her front porch. She wore a faded red nurse's pin on her blouse, a relic from the Korean War. I know what a real soldier looks like, she said, eyes steady. I've seen boys go into battle scared, proud, bleeding, but never losing their dignity. She held up a printout of Elijah's photo. I see that same look in his eyes. The video hit 3 million views overnight. Colonel Langston gave a brief press statement the next morning. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He just stepped up to the microphone, flanked by members of the military black, white, brown men, women standing as one. There is no place in uniform or out for racism to hide behind a badge. He looked directly at the cameras. The military honors those who serve. But more than that, we honor what they stand for. He stepped back. No Q&A, no spin, just truth. Through it all, Elijah said nothing. Reporters camped outside his home, news vans parked across the street, producers called offering national interviews, offers for book deals, documentaries. But he didn't speak. He sat on his porch in quiet reflection, watered his front lawn, walked his dog. Sometimes he'd pause by the folded flag on his mantle, the one sent to him after Sergeant Davis, his best friend, died in Iraq. Sometimes he'd just stare out the window. And still, silence. Not out of fear, not out of shame, but because his silence said more than words ever could. It was a reminder that not every war is fought on foreign soil, and not every battle makes headlines. Sometimes dignity is the loudest form of resistance. And while Elijah stayed silent, the world around him started to speak up. A state senator tweeted, "We need legislation to protect servicemen from racial profiling. Immediately." A retired Marine shared, "I wore that same uniform, but never had to defend it at a gas station." Thousands of veterans began posting photos of themselves in uniform, using the hashtag "We stand with Elijah," and amidst all this noise, Ellie watched from her window. She'd become a bit of a hero at school. Her classmates hugged her, teachers thanked her, some even cried. But she didn't do it for that. She just kept staring at the screen, watching the view count rise, watching strangers thank her for pressing record. She whispered to herself, "He didn't deserve that. No one does." The tide had turned. A wave had begun, not just of justice, but of awareness, of truth that couldn't be undone, of voices that couldn't be silenced. And Elijah. He just stood by the window, still silent, still watching, still waiting. By the third day, America wasn't just watching, it was on fire. The clip of Elijah Brooks, shackled in full uniform, was no longer just a video. It was a statement, a scar, the kind that doesn't fade quietly. Twitter exploded, Facebook overflowed, YouTube thumbnails turned red with outrage. 2 hashtags dominated the nation. Salute Brooks. Justice. In uniform, veterans posted side-by-side photos, one in their youth, one today. Each caption told the same story. It could have been me. Families held homemade signs outside city halls. Respect the uniform. Respect the man. And on every major news outlet, one name rose like a drumbeat: Elijah Brooks. At the heart of it all was a journalist named Keisha Wright, seasoned, grounded. She'd reported from war zones, but said this story hit closer than any battlefield ever did. She dropped her article at 6 a.m. Front page. Bold black letters. An American hero in handcuffs. Does this country still know what it's fighting for? She didn't mince words. Elijah Brooks survived combat. He came home wearing the uniform of a nation he swore to defend. And for that, he was thrown to the ground, chained like a criminal while children watched. Not because he did something wrong, but because he was black and dared to wear honor on his chest. That article hit like thunder. Morning anchors read it on air. Radio hosts quoted it line by line. People printed it, framed it, passed it around church pews. By afternoon, the mayor of Augusta stepped onto the city hall steps, surrounded by cameras and microphones. You could see it in his eyes. This wasn't damage control. This was panic control. Effective immediately, he began. His voice strained but clear. Officers Brent Holman and Todd Reese have been relieved of duty and will face formal investigation. He looked directly at the lens. On behalf of this city and as its mayor, I offer a public apology to Sergeant Elijah Brooks, his family, and every man or woman who ever wore that uniform with pride. It wasn't enough. but it was a start. That same evening, a different spotlight shined. This time on Ellie, the 10-year-old girl with the heart of a lion. She sat in a plush TV studio, tiny legs swinging under the chair, hair tied back in a blue ribbon. The host asked gently, "Ellie, why did you decide to film that moment?" She blinked, thought for a second, then said quietly, "Because it didn't feel right. He was nice, like my grandpa. And I thought, if people saw it, maybe they'd care." The host nodded, caught off guard by the weight in her words. Then Ellie added even softer, "People should be asked before they're treated like they're bad. That's fair, right?" The nation didn't just hear her. It felt her. Meanwhile, Elijah Brooks sat on his porch, still silent. Neighbors waved, reporters lingered. Even a senator's aide stopped by, offering a statement to read if he wanted. He didn't. Not yet. He'd seen cameras before overseas after successful missions. He'd faced the sound of explosions, the smell of sand soaked in sweat. But this was something else. This was the storm after the silence. And he wasn't rushing through it. Inside his home, folded letters piled up. From school kids, from veterans, from mothers and fathers. Some just said, "Thank you for holding your head up." Others, "We're sorry. We didn't know. We do now." Still others asked him to speak, to lead, to rise. But Elijah just stood at his window, watching the sun go down, thinking about all the times he'd saluted a flag believing it saluted back. Back in the city, pressure mounted. Civil rights groups called for full prosecution. Veterans associations demanded national protections for uniformed personnel of color. State legislators drafted a bill in Elijah's name. And across America, people talked about race and uniforms in the same breath. Wasn't that the point of the uniform? To erase the differences, to unite, to protect. Then why did it take a child's video for people to see a man's worth? And still Elijah said nothing. No interviews, no camera time, not even a single post on social media. But his silence echoed. Because deep down, we all knew, when the world watches with open eyes, it's already started to change. And sometimes the loudest voices belong to those who refuse to speak until justice arrives first. The video had done more than spark outrage. It had lit a fuse. By the time the sun rose the next day, journalist Keisha Wright was already sifting through internal police records. She wasn't looking for a headline. She was looking for a pattern, and she found it. Officer Brent Holman had 4 prior complaints, each one alleging racial bias, verbal abuse, or excessive force. None had led to discipline. None had even been publicly acknowledged. They had been quietly buried, hidden in the folds of pending review and lack of evidence. Each file ended the same way: case closed, no action taken. Keisha stared at the 4th report longer than the rest. The handwriting belonged to a woman named Teresa M., a nurse who'd claimed Holman shoved her teenage son against a patrol car for walking too close in the dark. But the complaint had disappeared into silence. That silence was finally breaking. Within hours of her article going live, an anonymous email hit her inbox. No greeting, no name, just one line. "We reported him too. They didn't fire him. They moved us instead." Attached were internal memos showing at least 2 officers had tried to raise flags about Holman's behavior. One was reassigned to traffic duty. The other was sent to a remote precinct 3 counties away. Keisha's fingers froze over her keyboard. This wasn't just about one man's abuse of power. It was about a system designed to protect him. Miles away in a quiet room, Elijah Brooks sat alone. No cameras, no press, no applause. Just him, a screen, and the quiet hum of an old ceiling fan above. He read Keisha's article from a printed copy. Not because he didn't trust the internet, but because some things, some truths felt heavier when held in your hands. His eyes moved slowly across each paragraph, lingering on the parts about Holman's past. The nurse, the silenced officers, the quiet removals and quiet cover-ups. He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. But his fingers curled around the paper gently but firmly, like he was holding something sacred. At Fort Delaney, Colonel Langston stood at his desk reading the same article under the glow of his desk lamp. He didn't shout. He didn't slam his fist. He simply reached for a folder marked DOJ Correspondence and began to write. His letter to the Department of Justice was short, direct, and powerful. This is no longer an isolated incident. This is a pattern. We are prepared to cooperate fully with a federal investigation. Justice-like rank must be earned, not hidden behind a badge. When the envelope was sealed and placed in the outgoing tray, Langston stared out the window for a long time. Not because he doubted Elijah, but because he knew the system would now be forced to face itself. Back in Elijah's living room, the screen showed talking heads debating the story. Terms like racial profiling, qualified immunity, and systemic oversight echoed from the speakers. But Elijah heard something else. He heard the silence of every voice that had been ignored. He heard the weight of every uniform worn with honor and then stained by power abused. He wasn't looking for revenge. He wasn't even looking for justice anymore. He just wanted the truth out in the open where it couldn't be buried again. And as he watched the footage of himself handcuffed in uniform under the sun, he didn't blink. He just whispered, not to the camera, not to the world, but to himself. Truth can't be cuffed. And that truth was just getting started. The podium stood at the front of the police academy's main auditorium, simple, undecorated, and waiting. No banner, no flashing lights, just rows of cadets in navy blue, their backs straight, their faces caught between duty and doubt. And then Elijah Brooks walked in. He wore no medals, no bars of rank, just a plain black shirt and slacks, not even his uniform. Yet when he stepped onto that stage, the room fell still like the air knew it owed him silence. He looked out his eyes, scanning each face, not judging, not accusing, just looking, like he was searching for something. Then he leaned in toward the mic. No script, no cue cards. "I've served this country for 17 years," he began, his voice even calm. "In uniform, in war zones, in peacekeeping missions. I've worn the flag on my shoulder with pride." He paused. "But the day I was handcuffed in front of a convenience store, no one saw that. No one saw a soldier. They just saw a black man standing where to some he didn't belong." A few cadets shifted in their seats. One near the back lowered his eyes. "This isn't about guilt, or even blame," Elijah continued. "It's about perception. The question isn't whether I looked suspicious. The question is, why did I ever look suspicious to begin with?" That landed. You could feel it. Like a quiet chord had been struck somewhere deeper than they expected. From the rear of the hall, Colonel Langston watched without a word. He didn't stand. He didn't command attention. But every cadet in that room knew who he was and who he was watching. Elijah stepped back from the mic, then walked forward untethered from the stand. He didn't raise his voice, but somehow it filled the room more than a shout ever could. "I could have responded with anger," he said. "I could have demanded vengeance. And honestly, some part of me wanted to." He looked down for a moment, gathering a breath. When he looked up again, something in his expression softened. But revenge teaches nothing. Silence, though. Silence lets others hear their own conscience. And sometimes that's louder than any protest. A single cadet, a young woman in the third row, blinked away tears. She wasn't alone. By the time Elijah's final words left the air, no one moved. No one clapped. Not yet. He simply turned, stepped off the stage, and walked down the center aisle. And then one slow clap. Then another. Then a ripple rising into a full wave of applause that followed him all the way out the door. He didn't wave, didn't smile. But for the first time since that day on the sidewalk, he walked without weight. Later that night, the Academy's official livestream posted the speech under one title, "Silence is the highest form of resistance." Within hours, it had 3.2 million views. In the comment section, strangers called him a new kind of hero, not because he fought back, but because he refused to become the very thing that broke him. One comment read, "He didn't raise his voice, but he raised the bar for all of us." And as Elijah sat in his car parked beneath the quiet shadows of a tree-lined street, he finally allowed himself one exhale. Not of relief, but of peace. The battle hadn't ended, but for the first time, he knew which side of history he was standing on. The porch creaked gently beneath Elijah's chair as he rocked back and forth, slow and steady. A tall glass of sweet tea sat beside him, half-full beads of condensation catching the last golden rays of the sun. The sky. It was that kind of orange you only get after a storm. Soft, quiet, and impossibly wide. And for the first time in weeks, it felt like peace. No sirens, no cameras, just the chirping of crickets and the faint rustle of magnolia leaves swaying in the breeze. Elijah took a sip of his tea and closed his eyes for a moment. He wasn't thinking about courtrooms or cuffs. He wasn't replaying the sidewalk or the speech. He was just breathing, like a man finally allowed to take up space in his own skin. A small knock sounded from the front gate. It was Ellie, her ponytail a little crooked, clutching something close to her chest. Elijah smiled, waving her up the steps. She didn't say a word at first, just handed him the folded paper. It was a drawing. Crayon on construction paper. Her style was messy, but bold. There he was, Elijah standing tall in a tan uniform, fists unclenched. Behind him were stars, and in front of him a little girl holding his hand. At the top she had written in big purple letters, "You're the first hero I ever met." He looked down at her. "Did you really draw this?" She nodded fast, and Mommy laminated it. Elijah chuckled softly, blinking a little faster than usual. "Well, guess I better frame it, huh?" Ellie smiled wide. "That's what heroes do." A while later, Mr. Abbas appeared. Still in his store apron, though he carried a wicker basket filled with peaches, bananas, and a tin of fresh dates. "No receipt," he said, gently placing it on the porch rail. "Just a thank you." Elijah looked up, puzzled. Abbas handed him an envelope, slightly wrinkled, stuffed with folded notes. Letters, handwritten, from the community, from neighbors, strangers, folks who'd watched the video and felt something shift. One note read, "You didn't yell, you didn't swing, but somehow you shook the ground beneath us all." Another. "Your silence made more noise than any siren I've ever heard." Mr. Abbas lingered for a beat, then placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "You reminded people," he said, voice low, "that dignity isn't loud, but it's unforgettable." Elijah didn't reply. He just nodded, held the man's hand for a moment longer than expected. As the sky dipped into a deeper orange and the sun slipped low behind the hills, Elijah stayed seated. No phone, no TV. Just him, the wind, and the rhythm of a rocking chair. He didn't need to post anything, didn't need to explain himself again, didn't need to make speeches or sign autographs. His work was already done. He had walked through humiliation and not lost his grace. He had chosen peace, not because he was weak, but because he knew its weight. That kind of strength doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't come with medals or headlines. It sits quietly, on a porch at sunset, with sweet tea in hand. And as the last light disappeared beyond the trees, Elijah leaned back, closed his eyes, and smiled. Not because he'd won, but because he hadn't let the world change who he was. They handcuffed him like a criminal. But he stood up like a man who made the whole nation look inward. Final words from Mr. Mack's Stories. If this story moved you even just a little, we hope you'll take a moment to reflect on what it means to hold on to dignity in a world that doesn't always recognize it. Elijah's journey wasn't about revenge. It was about restraint over rage, character over chaos, and choosing peace without losing power. At Mr. Mack's Stories, we believe in telling the kinds of stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Stories that stir empathy, question injustice, and remind us what true strength looks like. So if this resonated with you, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone you care about, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss another powerful moment like this. Your support means the world to us. Every like, every share, and every new subscriber gives our team the fuel to keep creating stories that matter. This is more than just storytelling. This is Mr. Mac's Stories, where silence speaks, truth echoes, and justice remembers.